to Immediate Immersion Live. How is everybody doing today? And for those watching on the replay, welcome. Let me put my glasses on so it's easier to see. It's great to see everybody today. So again, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about formative assessments and informal formative assessments, to be exact. So you're watching Immediate Immersion Live. My name is Scott Benedict, and we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. And we'll be right back after this short intro. And welcome back again. We are here talking about formative assessments, and I've got 5 types that I want to talk to you guys about today. The first, and of course, if you ever have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat, whether they are you're watching the replay or you're watching live. I will address them for you. So today I want to talk about 5 different types of formative assessments that I use in my classroom to help me evaluate where my students are. And the first of which is anecdotal. And so there's lots of things that you do in your classroom where you get some anecdotal evidence of where their proficiency level lies. And so I make notes of these mentally. And I have little flashcards with all my students' names on them. I often use them to call students. And I can, on the back of them, just make a short little note. Something that I see. And things that I'm looking for are they showing comprehension when I ask them individualized questions? When I ask them questions, are they just giving me the answer? Or are they adding to that answer a little bit more? Are they answering in single words or short choppy sentences or longer sentences? Any of those types of things I will keep track of. I also keep track on, are they raising their hands or are they waiting for me to call on them? Are they engaging with what we're doing in class, or are they kind of letting everything go just over their heads? So any of those anecdotal things that I'm observing in the classroom, I'll make note of and then add to the cards. So I have all that information. So we do conversations once a week. And one of my students says, wait, you do that? Yes, I do. You just don't notice me doing that. So I'm looking at them like our conversation days. I'm asking questions. And I have scaffolded sentence starters up there. Some kids use them, some don't. And I make a note of that. Are they just giving me a one-word answer? Because I'm giving them the sentence structure they need to be able to answer in a more complete. So I'm scaffolding it for them. Some kids choose to use it and some don't. But I make note of that. The ones who don't either lack the confidence or just want to get it over with. And then there are kids who want to learn more and they try to say the whole sentence or elaborate along the way. When I'm asking questions, like we're doing a story right now, we're working on a movie talk. In my level 3s, we're still in the talking about each frame of the video. In my level 2s, it's a different movie talk, and we are now in the reading stage, so I wrote the story out. I'll ask questions about things, and I'm making notes to the kids who answer the questions. I give points to kids who answer questions. I use Class Dojo to do that, and I give the points. And I have Class Dojo set up so I know why I gave the point. Did they ask a question? Did they answer a question? Those types of things. And so I can go back and look at the reports in Class Dojo and see for various students, what are they doing? Are they just answering the question? Are they asking questions? How engaged in the lessons are they? So all of those kinds of things I'll make notes of. And those are what you call the anecdotal type things, the things that you notice as you're a teacher going through the classroom, and you pay attention to those, and then you keep track of that. I have a student right now in one of my classes, and he can be good, but he can also be bad. And like lately, it's at the end of the school year, he's kind of checking out, and he just doesn't really pay much attention to class. He's kind of zoning out. So I'm making a note of that so that as I'm evaluating where their proficiency levels are, I can see maybe the reasons why they're not progressing at the same level as the student sitting next to them or something like that. So anecdotal are very valid forms of assessment. Just keep notes of those. As I said, I write them on the back of the cards, or I can also have notes I can keep track of. I have like a spreadsheet with all my students where I keep track of all of their quick write scores, and I can add notes to those as well so that I have some information, some evidence to go back. So when I'm evaluating their overall grade, I can have backup. One thing I'm lucky that my district allows us to do is we are not required to 100% use the math to calculate the grade if the math doesn't make sense. The types of ways that the math works in grading programs are not usually the best way to calculate someone's ability in something. Especially most grading programs use averaging, and averaging is really, really bad for grades. You know this already. If someone has 100% and they get a bad grade like a 0, it plummets the grade really, really quick, and it takes a long time for that grade to come back up, and it will never get back up as high as it once was. So when the math doesn't make sense, if I'm looking at the grades and I see that there was an anomaly, the kid did bad on one quiz one time, that lowers the grade, but that's not really indicative of their consistent ability. So I can throw that out or disregard it when I'm giving an overall grade. I can use my judgment along the way, and that's kind of the things that are really important. So thinking about the big picture, and these anecdotal observations can really, really help with that. Next, let's talk about practice quizzes. I do these as a warm-up, and there's all kinds of different practice quizzes you can do. The ones that I usually do, sorry, something that's stuck in my mouth. The ones that I usually do are like 5 questions, simple questions about things that we're working on, whether that be verbs, but not verb conjugations. I'll tell you how I do that. It's slightly different, and it looks at conjugations a little bit differently. But it can be 5 questions about a reading or a novel or a story that we did. But I generally keep it down to 5 questions so it can go really, really quick. And as I said, do it as a warm-up. So when I am practicing verbs, which we're really on the the fast track to practicing verbs before they move on to the next level, I'm making sure that my kids know the Sweet 16 really, really well in past and present and future. So I'm really working on those right now with my students. So when I'm working on verbs, I don't ask them to conjugate. They don't know what that is. But I'm either going to ask them, depending on where we are in the phase. Right now, we're in the second phase. But in the beginning of the year, we were in the first phase. So in the first phase, I will write the Spanish verb down, conjugated, and then they have to tell me what it means in English. So if I have hablo written up there, they're going to write I talk. And if I have queremos, they're going to write we want. So they're working from the language into their native language and working on that way. But they're not thinking about it in conjugations. I don't order them in conjugations. They are random verbs. Usually with the Sweet 16 is what I'm working with. Random verbs in random order to practice the different verb forms. But I don't ask them, to say, okay, conjugate for me the verb hablar. And they have to go, hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablan. Hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablaron. Hablaba, hablabas, hablaba, hablábamos, y hablaban, etc. They don't do those kinds of things. I give them the verb and I ask them what it means so that they don't have to go through the pattern to get to the we form. They don't have to go, okay, the I, then the you, then the he, then the we. They don't have to do that. They can just get to the we because that's how we've practiced them. In the second phase, then I work from the English and they have to give me the target language verbs. So I'll ask, how do we say we will want? And they need to say queremos. Or they will have. They'll need to write tendrán. So all of that stuff will have to be there for them to be able to complete all that stuff. So those are some of the practice quizzes. You can also do a practice listening quiz where you just give them a small sample of a listening quiz with maybe only 5 questions, or a reading quiz. Just practice quiz along the way. These aren't necessarily going to go in the grade book, but you want to track them so that you can kind of see where they are before a summative test comes in. So we have a way in our grade book to put them in where they don't count towards the actual grade, but we can track them and parents can see them and students can see them. And so we do that under our formative assessments, but they don't add up to the grade. So the overall grade only looks at summative the way our grading program is set up by our district. So I want them to have formative. They get the practice. They see the where they are, and it gives me information to tell me when to give them the summative, because I don't want to give them the summative when they're not ready for it, so all the grades are lower. I want to make sure that they are ready for what they need to be doing on the summative assessment. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please add them into the chat and we'll take a look at those. The next one is comprehension checks. And comprehension checks are what we do constantly in the classroom. We're constantly asking, what does this word mean? What did I just ask? What did I just say? These are formative assessments. They're letting you know whether the students as a whole, or a student, if you're asking an individual, is with you in the lesson. If they can't answer the question, then you're getting some feedback and you need to figure out why they can't answer the question. Was it one, they didn't understand the question? Which is why comprehension checks should be in the common language. For me, that would be English. Because if they didn't understand the language to begin with, asking them another thing in the language isn't going to help clarify things. So comprehension check should be in English. So that's number 1. Did they understand the question? Did they understand the lesson up to this point? Was it over their head? Were they not paying attention? Or were they shy and they don't feel confident to answer? All of those things are valid responses that give you feedback as a teacher on what you can do to then overcome it. If from my determination, let's say I ask a comprehension question and I get crickets. They don't say anything. So now I've got to figure out why. Since I asked the question in English and that's their native language, I don't understand the question is not part of it. So then I've got to think, were they paying attention? And if so, then I need to go back in the lesson to find out where they got lost and bring them back up to speed. If they weren't paying attention, then I need to remind them of the class rules, that you need to be paying attention with your eyes and your ears. You need to be trying to understand everything that's going on and being said so that you can focus on the language. If I need to step back, that's fine. I just go back to where I think they need, Get them to where we are now, back there, and then ask the question again. And if they can answer it, then great. And if not, I need to do some other things, maybe rewording, going back a little bit further, ask some clarifying questions like where are we lost, so I can help them through that. But comprehension check questions are so important, and you want to do them all the time, every 3 to 5 minutes at least. You want to be doing those. And it should be something that's constantly going. Think of it like this. If you have someone who's leaving Minneapolis and they're supposed to be heading to California, if you wait 10 or 15 minutes to do a comprehension check in class, they could be halfway to New York in the wrong direction. But if I'm asking comprehension check questions much quicker, I'm going to notice much quicker that they're heading in the wrong direction, and we can do a course correction. So that's what you want to do in your classroom. You want to ask as many comprehension questions as you can to check for that comprehension before they get lost too far. There's nothing worse than you going through the whole class period, 40 minutes, half an hour, whatever your class period is, not asking comprehension questions, and at the end of class, you ask one, and the class is so lost, you lost them in the first 5 minutes. That's a whole waste of a class period. So it's best to be able to do these comprehension checks so you can find when your kids get lost sooner so that you can fix it and get them to where they need to be. So comprehension checks are a really important component of formative assessments. Exit tickets. Exit tickets are another one. I usually give exit tickets in the form of using a flip.com video, but you can do them as little slips of paper the kids fill out on their own. It could be a Google form that they fill in. It could be a little mini quiz that goes at the end, whatever you want to do. One of my common ones is using flip.com. If you don't know, that's like a video recording for teachers. And I'll have kids tell me 3 things we did today in class, or 3 things about the story that we told today, or 3 things about what we read today in our chapter. Those types of things, I'll have them do that. Or if we did a conversation question that day, go home and tell me your answer again in the target language on the video. So a lot of those are exit tickets, things that I'm asking kids to tell me that if they paid attention in class, it should be quite easy for them. And it allows me to see, were they really understanding? Were they goofing off? Was there some confusion along the way? All of those things can be very, very helpful in letting me know how the kids are working in class. Now, I usually do exit tickets about once a week. Some teachers do them after every class. Some people do them 2 or 3 times a week. It just depends how you want to handle it. But exit tickets are a very valid way to get an idea, to get a gauge of where your students are based on that class period. And if you do them after every class, again, you can catch where there might be holes or gaps in learning or understanding so that you can fix them much more quickly along the way. So it really goes hand in hand with those comprehension checks that you're doing within class, and then your exit tickets, your final kind of little assessment to see, did you understand what went on in class, and show that to me in class. So that's what I like about exit tickets. They're really quick. I do mine digitally because I don't want to waste the paper, and I have a record that way. So if it's a flip.com assignment, I have a record. If it's a Google form, I have a record so I can see the responses. I can look at the pie chart. I can see where my kids are. All of those things can be done. I also use exit tickets when we're creating characters. So after we establish the basics of the character, I'll send kids home with 2 questions. One is, why does the character feel the way they do? One of the things we do when we figure out a character, we create one, is we give it a main emotion. And it could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be happiness, it could be just about anything, whatever we decide. And then I'll ask, the first question is, tell me in English why the character feels this way. And my second question will be, what's the deepest, darkest secret of this character? So then I can collect all that information and use the answers to that to help create a plot for our character for the next day. And so that's another way I use exit tickets along the way as well, to help us develop characters and set up our plots. Because now that I know why a character feels the way they do, that's the genesis of my plot. And then I can throw in this deep, dark secret that some kid figured out, that we can add it in there for high interest. So those are exit tickets. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the last thing on my list, reflections. Now, reflections are always done in the common language. This is not time to find out how well they can write in the target language. They're not going to be able to communicate the idea of a reflection in a target language. It's just not going to be done as easily. So have them do this in the common language. So I ask them all different types of questions. I'll ask them, goal setting questions. What activities help them learn? What activities don't help them learn? What do they think their strengths or their weaknesses are? Anything like any kind of reflection question. Just Google reflection questions. But it gives me a lot of insight into what students are thinking, how they're thinking, and why they may be thinking that way. I like to give them often after a quiz, let them know, like say, why do you think you did the way you did on a quiz, and explain. After a writing quiz, why do you think you did the way that you did? Or a speaking quiz, analyze why, what your strengths, what your weaknesses are. I tell them no matter what the question is, the answer is not as important as the explanation that goes with the answer. So if I think you didn't do so well on writing, but you thought you did awesomely, and you wrote that in reflection, I did awesome on my last writing because I want to know that, because that's where the gems lie in the reflections. And it gives me a lot of formative ideas about what's going on in their head, their explanations, why they think they may have done well when they may not have, or why sometimes kids think they did really horribly and I'm thinking what they wrote was amazing. They just have a lack of confidence, or they're comparing themselves with what they can do in their native language versus what they do in the second language. So I like to use reflections to get that information out. We're about to start writing a big reflection for the whole year in my classes next week. Next week is our last full week of school, and then we've got 2 days after that we do. So what we're going to do, one of the things we're going to do next week is I had the kids save all of their quick writes from the beginning of the year to the last one. I think we're going to end up with 37 or 38 quick writes that we did over the year, one for every week. And I want the kids then to look at the first one and the second one and look at the progress. And I want them to reflect upon their word count. And it's going to be hard for them to analyze the word count overall, because they're not going to get to take into account that time went down. So let's say if last week they wrote 100 words and this week they only wrote 78, they're going to think they did poorly when actually they didn't, because we went down by 30 seconds. So I'll teach them how to calculate their word per minute, which is going to be a much better indicator, so we can see how everything is going. So I want the word per minute count and look at that as a graph. So they'll graph out their word per minutes, and then they're going to go ahead and then write about what do they think about their word per minute count. Did it increase? Did it decrease? Was it a lot of peaks and valleys? Talk about that. But then I want them to look at the content, the body of their writing. So maybe their word per minute count went down, but the content got better, more in depth. So then obviously by writing more in depth content, the word count is going to take a hit from that. So we'll have them write about that as well. And then the third thing I want them to reflect upon is, what about their level of Spanish? So do they think their level of Spanish has improved from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year to the end of the year? And this is a really important reflection, that when I read these, I'm going to get a really good sense of where my students are at with regard to writing in the target language. So these are just some ideas that I have, some 5 areas where you want to look at formative assessments, and keep in mind that these aren't necessarily part of the grade, but they can influence your overall assessment of the student. So if your district does let your judgment play into it, then you can use some of these anecdotal, these practice quizzes, comprehension checks, exit tickets, or reflections to help you determine what the actual grade should be and the level of proficiency. So if anybody has any questions about any of those, please feel free to type them in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, put them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them for you. If you found any of this helpful, it would be great if you could like and subscribe. That really does help us get the word out to more teachers, so they can also watch the videos and learn week from week with us. So that really does help us. So please like and subscribe if you found any value from this. If you're just getting started with comprehensible input, we do have a free masterclass. And let me pop that up here. And that's available at mm.us/masterclass. And that will go over the basics. It's an 8 lessons to go over the basics of comprehension-based instruction. So you can get started with that. If you've already done that, or you need more in-depth, our complete course is called our Webversity Pro course. It's got over 30 lessons. And we go into much more detail about a lot of this stuff so that you can get into the nitty-gritty and really learn all the finer points. The videos that we do week to week, or that we publish every Wednesday on the channel, they just go over the top, the surface of the information. If you really want the deep, then our Webversity Pro course is what you want. So with that, unless there's any other questions, I thank all of you for showing up today. Greatly appreciate your time, and I will see you next week. Let me see. Do I have our topic yet for next week? Let me just give a really quick look and see what we have going. Do I have our topic for next week? Oh, yes, I do. We're going to go back to the basics and using TPR. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. Again, next Monday, 5 o'clock Pacific time, same place, same channel on YouTube and Facebook. And again, I thank all of you for watching. And if you're watching the replay, please leave your questions and comments in the comment box, and I'll be sure to answer them. With that, everybody have a great week, and I will see you next Monday. Bye-bye.